I'm a pilgrim, and I'm a stranger. I can tarry but a night. Do not detain me, for I am going to where the fountains are ever flowing. I'm a pilgrim, and I'm a stranger. I can tarry but a night. There the glory is ever shining. Oh, my longing heart is there. Here in this country, so dark and dreary, I long have wandered, forlorn and weary. I'm a pilgrim, and I'm a stranger. I can tarry but a night. There's the city to which I journey. My Redeemer is its light. There is no sorrow, nor any sighing, nor any tears there, nor any dying. I'm a pilgrim, and I'm a stranger. I can tarry but a night.
How sweet are the tidings that greet the pilgrim's ear as he wanders in exile from home. Soon, soon will the Savior in glory appear, and soon will the kingdom come. The mossy old graves where the pilgrims sleep shall be opened as wide as before, and the millions that sleep in the mighty deep shall live on this earth once more.
He's coming soon, I know, coming back to this earth again, and the weary pilgrims will to glory go when the Savior comes to reign.
There will meet ne'er to part in our happy Eden home. Sweet songs of redemption will sing. From the north, from the south, all the ransom shall come and worship our heavenly King.
He is coming soon, I know, coming back to this earth again, and the weary pilgrims will to glory go when the Savior comes to reign. Hallelujah, amen, hallelujah again. Soon and faithful we all shall be there.
Oh, be watchful, be hopeful, be joyful till then, and a crown of bright glory will wear.
He's coming
All right. Welcome, Dr. Tim. I am Larry Kirkpatrick. I'm a pastor here in Michigan, state of Michigan, and we want to welcome everybody to Remedial Protestantism podcast. I think it's our 22nd for the year, and I have with me as a guest Dr. Dr Perenich, and some of you might not be familiar with Tim. Tim, why don't you just take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into our main presentation?
Certainly. I am a chiropractor in the state of Florida. I co-authored a book that was published in 2017 that was critical of the official statement in 2015. So my co-author and I were very critical of it, and we examined all the claims in there, whether or not the statement is supported by the Bible, the spirit of prophecy, and science. And of course, we went the extra mile to see if it even adds up to our own history. So yes, that's how I got into all of this. I'm very much into church history, prophecy. I participate in my local church and do different speaking engagements and things like that. So that's basically what I do.
All right. I don't know, Tim, if you saw the rather extravagant title I gave our presentation today, 2015 Immunization Statement Questions Resolved in capital letters. So that's a very extravagant title, but I guess when we get to the end here today, we'll let our viewers determine whether we've done something in that direction. Of course, I don't believe we will. Everybody will be persuaded by what we're about to hear, but anyway, hopefully we can settle into some degree of clarity about what the statement is and why the statement is, and whether we're just beating a dead horse all over the place here at this point, or whether there's something truly very, very important that really remains to be resolved in a way that can help the church proceed forward in its mission. So anyway, thank you for stretching out and doing some more research on this statement, which you probably have grown a bit tired of after so long. But anyway, I know when I read your book, I believe I read your book, and I did a YouTube review reaction to the book. It may have been as early as March 2020. Anyway, I found the book that you referred to, and I hope you'll remind our viewers what that book is. I found it to be very, very insightful, very provocative in helping me at those very early stages, as we were kind of in the haze of the fog of war, so to speak, in the early weeks of this remarkable global event that happened in 2020. That book really was very useful to me to orient myself in this particular item, which as of right now, this month where we've had general conference session, has become has continued to increase in significance and kind of some frustrating elements for some of our church members. So anyway, thank you for doing the book, you and your co-author, and I very much appreciated. And today, and I don't think I'll set the stage. I'll let you maybe do that. But at our general conference session, we found out there were different versions of this, and possibly different versions hanging in the wrong place for 10 years. So you've prepared a fairly significant presentation for us. And what I want to do here, I guess, is let me remind our guests here. Along the way, if you have any comments or questions, if you're in the YouTube stream, you're welcome to type them in, and we'll try to get to them before we're done. But we may have a portion of time here near the front where Tim is presenting, but you can throw them in at that time too. So Tim, what I want to do is I am going to pass this over to you. Let's see if we've done this correctly now. We were working on this before we began. I think this is what we wanted.
Yes, I think so.
I think you might need to add.
We're good.
All right, there we go. So let me bring it up here. I think there it is. So why don't you go ahead and begin, Tim, and just begin your presentation. And I hope our viewers are praying and have thought about this a bit ahead of time. And now, Tim, tell us, sort of fill in the blanks and give us kind of an overview and then kind of a comparison here as you've been able to pull it together so that we
Yes.
kind of try to understand.
Well, thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. I believe a lot of us were wondering what was going on in 2020. I mean, many of us were told that if we stood on a dot 6 feet apart, that it would prevent us from getting the worst disease known to mankind. People were running out of toilet paper. Churches were closed, but marijuana dispensaries, strip joints, and liquor stores were open. There was a lot of confusion about it. And in the midst of the confusion, there was a question of what should people who believe in a health message do in regards to this, and what should Bible believing Christians do in regards to this. And many churches made decisions on it, but the Adventist decision was made for just about all members in 2015. And this statement that was made sort of went underneath the radar screen. Few people even noticed it. My co-author and I, as I said, we noticed it and we were like, this is not good. And so we decided to write a book that was published in 2017 called Vaccination, Biblical Revelation, Ellen G. White, History and Science. And we wanted to examine the 2015 statement to see if it actually held water. Does biblical revelation support the 2015 statement? Does Ellen G. White's writings, does history and science, does it all support that? And of course, you have to read the book. We don't believe that any of those things really support the statement. But the key of the fact of the matter is the statement was made, and we need to get to kind of understanding this statement a bit. And so the 2015 statement, and I'm putting these slides here. I just want everyone to think for a moment. This is a picture of Loma Linda. Beautiful, a lot of work done there. But you have to ask yourself, like, does anyone have any idea what it takes to operate that facility? You know, you pay secretaries, you pay maintenance people, security, insurance. You have to have a billing department and administration, healthcare providers, a number of healthcare providers, nurses, physicians' assistants, keeping certain medications in. You have to keep up with compliance. I mean, does anyone have an idea what it costs to maintain this? And if you have any idea, if you've ever worked in healthcare, you start to realize that the costs are astronomical. The costs are astronomical just to run a facility of this nature. And whether you think that's good or bad, I'm just pointing it out there that whatever it costs to run it, this tells you that this is a force of momentum on its own. It's a force of nature on its own because of how much it costs, how much resources it pulls just to keep it running. I'm not saying grow it, just to keep it running. And of course, it has been growing. This is another facility that was recently made. And this is a children's hospital. And you can see that it costs $1.2 billion. But I assure you that it costs a lot just to maintain it, just to keep the wheels turning in there. And you have to understand this, like, if you're going to have institutions like this, and this was built, I think, around 2014, but if you're going to have institutions built like this and you're going to have all this, then can you really step outside the medical paradigm which keeps this thing running? Can you really do that? I want you to think about it, because the statements that have been made were made in a context. And that context has a lot to do with keeping the doors, keeping the machinery going. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's how those statements are made. The decision makers have to make those statements because this is quite an undertaking. Now, I want you to see this. This is a December 18, 2020 article published in the Advent Review. And I want you to see very carefully how it's all set up here, because this statement that they're going to make here in the review sounds a lot more like the 2025 statement that people have noticed has the 2015 statement seemed to be revised. Well, actually, it doesn't seem to be. It was revised. But I want you to see this here, because this is something that they have been saying. They have been very consistent in their views on their ideas about vaccination. So just read it briefly. Adventist Health Ministries is firmly based on the Bible, the instruction of the Spirit of Prophecy through Ellen White, and is consonant with peer-reviewed, evidence-based health science. That sounds a lot like both statements, the 2015 and the 2025. And notice that even here they say consonant, which is sort of this idea that we have in the 2025 statement where it says it is informed. So very much, and then notice, very much in harmony. What they did is nothing new. Again, this is in 2020. It says, we rely on these foundations in formulating health approaches and advice. With millions infected and many dead, the global infections on the increase, a number of vaccines have been developed in record time. There are numerous questions that people are asking regarding COVID-19 vaccine. As a church, while we support evidence-based public health recommendations, we are also careful not to make pronouncements that may be construed as replacing national, international public health guidelines. For this reason, it is important for our comments to be understood within the framework of our official church position on immunization, and it has the link there. So notice that they're very concerned that they do not want to step out and contradict these healthcare authorities, governments. They don't want to do that, but they're also very clear that the very statement, the position that they're taking is in harmony with the Bible, the spirit of prophecy, and is either informed or is in harmony with peer review literature. This is what they're saying. Now, here is the 2015 statement, and you'll notice it was written in March 2nd, 2015, and I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's very short. The Seventh-day Adventist Church places strong emphasis on the health and well-being. The Adventist health emphasis is based on biblical revelation, the inspired writings of Ellen White, co-founder of the church, and on peer-reviewed scientific literature. As such, we encourage responsible immunization, vaccination, and have no religious or faith-based reason not to encourage our adherents to responsibly participate in protective and preventive immunization programs. We value health and safety of the population, which includes the maintenance of herd immunity. Now, this is very much a pro-vaccine statement. Notice that their thrust is that we have no religious or faith-based reason not to encourage people to get shots. We have no religious or faith-based reason to exclude ourselves from preventative immunization programs. And we, based on our faith, the biblical revelation, Ellen G. White, and peer review literature, we also believe that we should include herd immunity, the maintenance of herd immunity. So you can see that they put this in here. The last paragraph is sort of their caveat. And their caveat is, we are not the conscience of individual church member, and we recognize individual choices. These are exercised by the individual. Choice not to be immunized is not and should not be seen as the dogma nor doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So very much, if you decide to be immunized, that is it. That is within the doctrine and teaching of the church. If you decide that you want all the vaccines you can possibly get, that is in harmony with the church. But if you decide not to, that's on your own. That's very much on your own. And again, they have been consistent. People are like, well, you know, they changed. No, they're very consistent in all this. Where they changed is, here's the new statement taken from the website. And what I love about this is, if you look carefully, it says that it was made April 15th, 2015. But this one was originally drafted in March 2nd, 2015. And so essentially it reads pretty much the same. They've changed some of the language here. I like how they changed the some of the language, but it's essentially the same. It says the Seventh-day Adventist Church places strong emphasis on health and well-being. The Adventist health emphasis is based on the Bible, the inspired writings of church co-founder Ellen White, and is informed by peer-reviewed scientific literature. Now, I like how they weaken it a bit, informed, but it doesn't matter. It ultimately, and we'll get into it, it doesn't matter, because our health emphasis is no longer really founded on the Bible, as I will show, and no longer really founded on what the spirit of prophecy has to say. This is really a fig leaf to sort of cover up whatever we want to do in modern medicine. This isn't really anything at this point. As such, we encourage responsible immunizations. In other words, all three support immunization, vaccination, and have no religious or faith-based reason not to encourage our adherents to responsibly participate in protective and preventative immunization programs. We value the health and safety of the population, which includes maintenance of what is known as herd immunity. You can see some change in the language there, but still, herd immunity, you should be vaccinated. There's no religious or faith-based reason not to. Not according to what we believe. This is what they're saying. And they've been consistent. And everyone who's read this, whether it be secular people, government officials, even other church members, they all agree this is a very pro-vaccine statement. And again, this is their little caveat. We are not the conscience of the individual church member. We recognize individual choices. These choices are exercised by the individual. In other words, if you don't want the shot, you are out on your own. Refusal of immunization is not and should not be seen as a teaching nor doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Again, very much, and I like how they put this down here. This statement was voted by the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Administrative Community in Silver Spring, Maryland on April 15, 2015. Now, I like how they put that there when they actually published this statement in March 2nd, 2015. So either way, you can say, well, it's not official. There's a little bit of chicanery here, but does it really matter? It doesn't matter, because this policy isn't going to change. And I appreciate the work that SDA Pearl has done and trying to point out this idea that our health message really isn't built on peer-reviewed literature. There's a lot of bad things in peer-reviewed literature that we wouldn't agree with. It's really based on the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. So I think that's really good, and I believe that a number of conferences and churches putting pressure on the General Conference has been a good thing. I think it's good, but I think we must realize that the entire statement is phony. It's a complete fabrication. As I said before, it is a fig leaf to cover up what we really want to do. And as I mentioned, when you invest the type of capital that we have into one form of medicine with all the institutions, you're going to do whatever it takes to keep the wheels running. You're going to keep the trains running on time. That's what you're going to do. It doesn't matter. You're going to bend everything towards that. And that's unfortunately the position we're in. But the question is why did we even think at this time in 2015 to make this statement?
Right. That's for the full existence, the time from the founding of the church, even before we had official denominational structure and machinery.
Yes.
From the beginning, previous to that, then once we get the machinery in the 1860s and on out to today, up until 2015, 10, 11 years ago, we seem to survive quite well without this statement. Most of us who are members today, many of us were certainly baptized, and this statement didn't exist and never entered into our thoughts.
Yes.
A lot of people did not until the 2020s even realize this statement had any existence anywhere.
Yeah.
So up until the last 5 years of the history of this movement, this church, we seem to have gotten along rather well without this statement.
Yep.
So where you're coming to now, it sounds very interesting, because if we didn't need it up until now, why did we suddenly need it beginning 10 years ago?
Yes, and I would suggest that you couldn't have made this statement in the 1860s, 1870s. You could not have. Anyone who's ever read the book or seen some of the presentations I've done where I showed you some of the statements questioning by either John Harvey Kellogg, by E.J. Wagner, by J.N. Loughborough, by others in the church, and in our publications, questioning the value of vaccines, questioning the value of compulsory or mandates, you would realize that you couldn't have this statement, that you wouldn't have been able to get the votes to do it. But the fact of the matter is things changed, and someone could say, well, we learned something. I don't know what we learned, but the fact of the matter is things have changed. But why 2015? Because you're right. They could have probably rolled this out back in the late 1950s and 60s when there was a whole growth of the vaccine industry and the war against polio. They could have done it then, but they didn't. They chose 2015, and there's a reason for it. I put this in here because I want you to see something, because I'm going to get to it. But I do appreciate this slide here, because notice what they say here. I just want you to remember that they're saying that the Bible and the spirit of prophecy with peer-reviewed literature all support the stance that they're taking on vaccination. It says, from a distinct perspective, another speculative view argues that vaccines make those who take them unclean. Supposedly unclean substances are used to produce them. In this regard, it should be clarified that abiding biblical instructions forbidding consumption of unclean food and blood do not apply to vaccines, for obvious reasons that vaccines are produced as medication to save lives, not serve as food. Now, that's very interesting, but I want you to just understand this. Are we bending the Bible to our understanding, or are we bending our understanding to the Bible? I just want to point that out, because no matter what statement we make, we should ask ourselves, is what we're doing making the authoritative spiritual direction, the authoritative writings, the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy in our church, and are we bending those so that we can do what we want? I just had to put that there because I can't imagine that being injected with aborted fetal cell tissues, whether you're eating them or not, would ever be considered clean. I just can't imagine those things. But either way, I'm just pointing that out. Now on to this idea, and of course, even to this point here, where they even point out that Ellen White, so they say the Bible supports it, and Ellen White got the smallpox shot, and so she supports it. I mean, this is the review 2020. So again, they've continually supported these statements, but we're going to get to the history behind it. I do want to point some other things out real quick. That I just want to show you this, because I pointed out how we're bending the Bible to say, hey, the laws of clean and unclean don't matter when it comes to vaccines, and how Ellen White got the smallpox vaccine, and therefore she supported all vaccine. And I've done my research on it, that you don't have any evidence that she ever got the shot, nor do you have any evidence that she supported it. But what essentially we've done is that we have turned off our brains to be critical towards medicine. And I want you to see this. They published this again, December 18, 2020, and they had Dr. Hogue, who I believe worked with pharmaceutical companies, but most importantly he was working with the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And so they were interviewing him. And so they asked him, does the messenger RNA vaccine change your DNA? And of course, he says, absolutely not. They're safe and effective, right? That's what he says. But what's interesting is that now we're doing the research, and we're finding that people who've been injected with some of these vaccines are still producing spike protein in 2 years, 3 years later, which is crazy. So what is that doing to your cells? We don't know. And then it says, can it be safe and effective as it was developed so quickly? And of course, he says, yes, it can. And it turns out that actually there are some vaccines that they developed really quickly that were pulled from the market, literally pulled from the market. It says, are the ingredients or preservatives in the vaccine dangerous? No, there wasn't. He's right there. He says, what are the side effects? And he's like, well, there aren't really anything. Soreness of arm, all this other stuff, a little bit of achiness. But one vaccine was actually pulled off the market due to myocarditis, strokes. We're finding an increase of cancer rates. So in other words, whatever the facts were, we were not interested. We had to go along with the program of supporting this. We had to do it. And again, the 2015 statement is the foundation of this. But you can see here that we weren't even interested in doing the science. So this doesn't seem to harmonize with peer-reviewed literature, doesn't seem to harmonize with the Ellen White's writings, it doesn't seem to harmonize with the Bible, but it doesn't matter. We have to go along with it. Now, I told you I was going to get into the history of where we got the 2015 statement, but it's in the slides. It's coming. But I want you to see this here. I just want to do a little thought experiment, all right? Because I'm making the point that when it comes to medicine, no matter what it is, we're going to find a way to do it. It doesn't matter what the Bible says. It doesn't matter what the Spirit of prophecy says. And it doesn't even matter if peer review literature goes against it. As long as organized medicine supports it, we support it too. And so that's my statement. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I want you to see this. So this is Ignaz Moniz, Antonio Ignaz Moniz, and he was the first to create or develop a procedure called the leucotomy, which we call the lumbotomy now. And he was watching some monkeys, and he saw that when they went ahead and destroyed their frontal lobes, that they were more docile and easy to deal with. And of course, believing in evolution, he's like, this is a great idea. We can do this to human beings. And so he began to come up with these different instruments that you could go into the skull, and you could basically ablate or obliterate parts of the frontal lobe to help people from depression, anxiety, being oppositional, obsessive compulsive, you name it. He thought this would be great. And he actually wins the Nobel Prize in 1949. There's a coin. There's a Portuguese banknote with his likeness on it. He won it. And you can see what his procedure ended up becoming. They originally started with a different thing where they would actually drill through the skull. But what they found is they could take an instrument like this, it looks like an ice pick, and they could push it past the thin plate in the back of the eye socket. There's a thin bony plate there. And you can puncture that. And you go straight into the frontal lobe, twist that around, and fix someone. And this was considered the science. The gentleman who popularized it is this man here with his arms exposed. That's Walter Friedman. He was a psychiatrist, and he popularized this. Now, again, we're getting back to the statement. Don't worry, we're getting back. But I just want you to see something here. Right? I'm making my case that no matter what it is in medicine, we're going to follow it. All right. And so anyways, here he is. He's doing the procedure. It's crazy. The guy's awake. They're holding him down. You see the hands on him. Other people are looking at him like, wow, this is really scientific. And here's a woman that they did it to. And it says case 18, depression for 4 years duration with constant complaint of painful eye. Patient 1 year after operation, she was indolent and euphoric and subject to convulsive seizures. Yet she made no complaints. Now, that's considered success. That in other words, she's no longer depressed. She has seizures. She's euphoric, but she's not complaining because you did this to her. You destroyed her by doing this. Let me fix this real quick. There we go. Okay. There we go. So this is my favorite one. So they did this to a young woman. In some instances, the best that can be done for the family is to return to the patient to them as an innocuous state, a veritable household pet. So after they do this to her, she becomes like a household pet. She says, simple schizophrenia patient makes nice household pets after operation. That's before lobotomy. She's messed up hair. After lobotomy, she's smiling because they probably told her to. She was never the same. Completely destroyed. Completely destroyed. This is even sicker. Here they are doing it to a young child, a young boy. You can see the swelling underneath his eyes after he's done. And of course, people are like, oh, you're just saying that. Psychiatry is wonderful. Psychology is wonderful. We love it. And I understand there's a large contingent of Adventists who believe that. Unfortunately, neither the evidence, the spirit of prophecy, or the Bible support any of that. But I want you to see this here. Neither does actually the scientific literature. So in this was published, let's see, I think this was published in 2007. And they went back and they examined all these reports of people getting lobotomies in Sweden. And they went back, and I just want you to see their conclusion. Medical superintendents were given full autonomy to decide on the clinical practice of lobotomy. Being left in the periphery of neurosurgical facilities, this led to their engaging general surgeons. Patients were operated on in surgical theaters lacking sophisticated technical equipment of coping securely with hemorrhages, which were common in the early implementation of the operation. The practice of lobotomy in some mental health and mental hospitals was extensive, and post-operative deaths were numerous, but the Swedish National Board of Health took a defensive role. Even with annual inspections, there was no important interference with the lobotomy question. Swedish media reported mostly positively on lobotomy, underlying the promising prospects of a new method submitted by the early proponents without critical questioning or independent investigations. Now, again, they were just looking at what the Swedish government did, that because they have national or socialized medicine. So here they were performing these lobotomies, and they were covering up that people were dying. After all, remember, the guy who invented it won a Nobel Prize. This was just considered science. This is just an evolutionary thing. We're trying to, break up the aberrant frontal lobe and help people. And so you can't stop a good thing, so to speak. This is actually a quote from Walter Friedman, the guy who saw bearing his arms doing the surgery. He says, no man, such as a dentist, physician, writer, or musician, who works with his brain is likely to get it back after his lobotomy. So really destroying people's lives. But this was considered science. Like I said, science. And I want you to see something here. This is a medical journal. This is Life and Health. This was published by Seventh-day Adventist, and this was given to other doctors and other people. And this this journal was to celebrate our health message. And guess what? In 1949, we published an article celebrating the lobotomy, celebrating it. There's a woman who went through it, and who knows if she even wrote it herself. She might have had someone have to write it. And notice that we were actually supporting this. So I'm just going to read, this is actually her testimony. She says, after the operation, this is the second to the last paragraph, after the operation, I noticed no deficiency in my mental faculties. My memory is just as good as it ever was. My disposition is just as stable. My judgment seems to hold a firmer check on impractical impulses than it did before my illness. And though I regret the disasters of all kinds, I have more emotional resistance to them. I've had fewer headaches and less mental fatigue. My moral standards are quite high. My love for my fellow man is greater. I love that because I wonder if she actually wrote it. Oh, I'm doing great. I'm more moral. I love my fellow man. And then she goes, I'm grateful to God, to the skillful surgeon who performed the lobotomy. I resolved that when the operation was over, I would write about it, hoping that my experience would encourage some other person languishing in the shadow of death. In other words, we published this because we were on board with the lobotomy. This is my point. And of course, here's Walter Friedman. And he actually says this. He says, I consider this interesting article a valuable contribution to medicine. This is the only description that has ever been given to us by a patient of the effects of this operation. No, it's not. He just lied. But we had to go along with thus saith the science. Thus saith the science. The Bible, no check on it. I mean, just like I get it. If you were to read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, you will not find the word lobotomy in there. All right? You won't find it in there. But neither, if you read very carefully the health prescriptions of Moses and the healing ministry of Jesus, you will neither find anything there that would legitimize doing lobotomies. You would not find anything there like that. Moreover, there's nothing in the spirit of prophecy that would ever legitimize doing that. And yet, here we are promoting it. And Lord knows how many we performed in our own hospitals. Lord knows. But we did it. Because why? We have to go along with the system. We cannot say no. When you have invested so much time, so much money, so much human resources, you can't say no, even to the worst of the worst. You would think that if you were reading the spirit of prophecy all day long, and you're reading everything that she had to say about health, even if you squint your eyes and dump salt water in them, you still would not be able to find anything in her writings that would legitimize destroying the brain in order to heal a so-called mental illness. She could never. There's nothing in there that ever would justify that. And yet, here we are in 1958 talking about the progress of science where they were taking hot water and injecting it into the frontal lobe and another lobotomy and using ultrasonics, destroying it. And we're like, this is the march of medicine. This is progress. This is science. Not questioning it, not saying, hey, this is probably a bad thing. We shouldn't be doing this. No, you can see here that even with this egregious example, we were not the head to come out and condemn it. Rather, we were the tail following the entire world going along with this. And so now I had to get through all of that, just to get to the context of the 2015 statement. I want you to see something here. Wherever medicine goes, we unquestioningly go along with it. Yes, let me be fair. If there's a study that comes out and says coffee is really good for you, we're probably not going to accept it. And if there's a diet fad that comes out that says you could just eat meat and salt, we won't accept it. And if there's a study that comes out that says smoking cigarettes is going to be helpful to you, that's right, we won't accept it. I wholeheartedly agree. Those are good things. I'm glad that we don't accept that. But everything else and the sacraments of medicine, when it comes to the sacraments of medicine, particularly vaccination, we are going to go along with it. So I want you to see this here. Here is the context. The context is there was a measles outbreak in California in 2015. And there was approximately 128 people who got measles from Disneyland. And it actually started right at the very end of December 2014 and really became in earnest in January. And this started to taper off by February and March. And so no one died. And it almost, and I think it was 37%, they didn't even know their vaccination status. So they could have been unvaccinated. We don't know. I don't know how they don't know, but they said they didn't know. And so the idea is that there was, I think, 45%, 43% of all those who got measles were unvaccinated. So this became a crisis. Everyone was like, we got to do something. The California legislature, we've got to do something. We can't let this happen. No one died. And mind you, back in the 1960s, before the vaccine even came out, in the 1960s, the U.S. population was 193 million. Out of 193 million, 400 people might have died annually from measles. 400. Most people got it and had immunity for the rest of their life. But somehow along the way, when the vaccine was developed, we now think of it as this terrible disease and you have to be vaccinated for it. But this was the context, the 2015 measles outbreak. Now, I want you to see this. This is not an Adventist publication. This is the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, the Southern Baptist Convention. All right. So these are the Southern Baptists, and they published an article in 2015 saying, hey, Christians should vaccinate. We don't want to be conspiracy theorists. The vaccines do not cause autism. They're safe and effective. You need to vaccinate yourself to show that you love your neighbor. This is what we should do. In other words, the memo had gotten out in 2015, not just to our organization, but to other organizations, that you need to get on the program and start challenging your members to get the shots because we don't want measles.
Did they actually use that business about conspiracy theory type motif that they're kind of throwing that fear bomb out?
Yes, yeah, that's the idea, that we don't want to fear monger because that's like a conspiracy theory. That's their idea. Yeah. So we get this and we're like, oh, well, look at that. So I just want you to see this here, that pressure was out. But here's the interesting thing. In 2011, there was a measles outbreak, and it was due to refugees or illegals. I'm not sure what the exact status was, but they came to California and measles they brought with them. And there was a measles outbreak due to them, due to the people coming in there. Nothing was said. Also in 2011, there was a measles outbreak in Canada where a good chunk of the population was vaccinated twice for measles. And this is published in another journal article. And they actually found that if you were vaccinated twice, you were more likely to come down with measles. And over almost 1,000 people, I think it was 756 people, got measles. But you never heard anything about that because they couldn't peg it on the unvaccinated. Here's another case in 2019 of vaccinations that came out, or another outbreak, and no one died. And they talk about all these outbreaks in many different states. And they were like, well, we have to do something about it. And they admit that no one died, that everyone got better and recovered. But the fact of the matter is, this has been a long time in the making. They've been doing this. And you can see what happened here in California. So this was published in 2019 by Stanford, and they were talking about California's responses. So this is what California did. California laws are among the toughest in the nation. Now, they love that, particularly since the state did away with personal belief and religious exemption in 2015. Following the measles outbreak that began in Disneyland. Now, I want you to see this because there was all this pressure that religious institutions, organizations needed to show themselves to be pinching incense on the altar of modern medicine, saying, hey, we're on the winning team. We're the good guys. We need to show you that we're following the science. And at this time, there were many, the legislature of California has to hold public comment for legislation. So when they were doing this, there were protests, there were people going to the Capitol and things like that. And guess what? I remember watching it online because you could watch the whole thing, and they would give these people like maybe a minute, 2 minutes. You would state who you were with and what you wanted them to do. And of course, they ignored most of the people who didn't want the shots. They had expert testimony, but there were people there who came there from Loma Linda to say, hey, I'm a Christian. I believe that we need to protect Californians, and we urge you to vote yes on the bill. Yes on the bill. They actually supported that bill, which took away personal belief and religious exemption in 2015. But guess what? They also, in 2019, California went a step further as well. They actually did away with their medical exemptions. They actually decided that what they would do is that any doctor who they thought was writing too many medical exemptions would be investigated, and it would go against his license, and someone else could look over the notes and say, hey, I think that you gave this medical exemption too hastily, and so that's going to be taken away from you. Essentially, California went so crazy that they even said, we're going to insert ourselves in the relationship between patient and doctor, so that even if the doctor thinks that the vaccine could be harmful, we're going to overrule and threaten the doctor's license.
So this is basically a cartel, and you have a fascist. I mean, just to use the proper terminology, but this is basically a fascist alignment of government and
Yes,
the medical cartel, and they are coming down and squishing anybody who does more than the bare minimum. They're just going to erase them from the profession.
that's right. That's exactly what they decided to do. And my point in bringing all this up is that you need to understand that things were being set up for a long time, because after all this happened, you see this article in Stanford is published in 2019. So in California, they slashed the medical exemption, did away in 2015 with the philosophical and religious exemption. And again, the good folks at Loma Linda were fine with all this. They were fine with all it. It didn't bother them. No one lost an ounce of sleep over it.
Well, they're inside the medical cartel.
That's
So
right.
to speak.
They're in the system. They're in the system.
Is it wrong? Is it wrong to use that terminology? I mean, is there something technically wrong about, or specifically wrong about saying medical cartel at this point?
No, there isn't. There was actually a book written by James P. Carter, I believe, where he actually calls modern medicine a cartel, a criminal organization. There was another article. There was a book written by Dr. Peter Gaucher, who used to be one of the members of the Cochrane Collaborative, and he calls the pharmaceutical medical industry, he calls it one of the most corrupt industries. He calls it a criminal organization because they I mean, look, let me just be like, it sounds like hyperbole, right? It sounds like hyperbole. But when you realize how often that these companies violate the law, the law as it's written, right? We whatever you think about the law as written, they violate the law and they end up paying some of the biggest fines known to man. Some of the biggest fines. They set records every few years of which company is going to pay more fines, but it doesn't hurt them. Right. Taking $600 million from a company that makes, $2 to $3 billion a year is a drop in the bucket.
And I'm not, when I say medical cartel, I'm not condemning all the well-meaning and godly men and women who practice medicine. They're practicing the kind of medicine they were taught. They're well-meaning. They want to help people. They're completely, they're not in there to be dastardly villains. But the system itself is so problematic that perhaps the word cartel is a useful, factual, descriptive type of word. But anyway, I guess people can take that or leave it. But yeah. I'm not trying to slaughter all the men and women who are trying to do good for people with what they've been taught. And I know that there's been a lot of good done, perhaps in spite of some of the corruption and so on. And who's to, and of course, medical is not the only thing that's corrupted. So anyway, I'm not rising to their defense. I'm just trying to be realistic.
Yeah, no, listen, there are many good people. I've met many of them, and some of them are my friends, and it's all individual cases. But as a whole, the type of organization, the philosophy, all of it is not very helpful and not conducive to liberty, personal liberty.
It is very appalling to me that the Seventh-day Adventist statement on immunization comes out in 2015, and it's in the same year that they're repealing the religious exemption.
Yes,
there's something kind of unholy about that for those come out at roughly in the same time space. But I'm slowing you down. So
that's all right. That's all right. So I want you to see something here. So California starts this trend in 2015. Another measles outbreak happens in different states in 2019. And after that, a number of states do away with their religious and philosophical exemptions. So this is an article in 2021, April. This was published in 2019. They did away with their medical exemptions, I believe, in 2021. They did away with all of it. This is in June. This is New York, and June 13th, 2019. New York did away with their religious exemption as well for vaccinations for kids going to school. In Maine, they did away with it as well in 2019. They got rid of it as well. And again, I just want you to see this here. You have to think about it. If there was going to be a pandemic, right? If there was going to be a pandemic, and I know people go, oh, well, you don't know that. But what I have to tell you is that they do tabletop exercises. Whether you think it's manufactured or whatever, they do tabletop exercises every year, every few years, where they create an imaginary pandemic, and they work with leaders and thought and with medical leaders, science leaders in industry and science, and they do a roundtable where they kind of war game what each one should do and how they should deal with a worldwide pandemic. And what I'm saying here is that it's quite convenient that before the pandemic starts, a number of states are repealing their religious and philosophical exemptions, and other states are doing that. And again, if you don't believe me, if you think that's far-fetched, what you need to do is you can go to PubMed and you can type in religious exemption. You can type that in. And you will find a number of articles of scientists, lawyers, doctors writing articles about how they have to work around the religious exemption, how this is problematic to getting everyone the shots that they want, how they need to come up with a scheme or something to get rid of it because they don't like it. They want you to have their type of medicine no matter how you feel about it because they know what's best. There was even an article written in, I believe, the Harvard Law Review by a woman who was saying that homeschool should be ended because it interferes with immunization rates. In other words, she sees that parents who homeschool their kids do so because they don't want to get their kids the vaccines required to go to public school or even private school in some states. And so she says we need to do away with it or curtail it to such a point that that is no longer an issue. So I want you to see this. All of this happened, and I don't think it just was random. It all happened. And here we are with our statement way ahead of the curve on this. I guess in this sense, maybe along with California, we're following the lead there. We're not leading, but we're just off the leader, I would say, with saying, hey, there's no reason for you not to get the shot. There's no faith-based or religious reason for you not to participate in immunizations. And we believe in the maintenance of herd immunity. We were sending a signal to whoever was listening that we're on the winning team, that we're going to go along with a system of medicine that we wholeheartedly believe in. And this, of course, is problematic because it has caused a lot of problems and division within the church. And I want you to see this here because this is from the Church State Council, Mr. Alan Reinach, who is a religious liberty attorney. He actually read the statement, and in 2021, I don't know who he was advising. I'm not sure who he's advising, maybe the California Conference, but this letter was sent out and it was eventually shared with me. And he's making it very clear here that when it comes to COVID-19, we need to encourage people to receive the vaccine. We need a high percentage of immunization in order to achieve herd immunity. He was simply reading the statement, and you can see his number one. I should have highlighted number one. His number one point, please do inform church members that the teaching and policy of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is pro-vaccine. So he was reading the statement, and obviously it's written in that way, and he understood that. So this created a lot of trouble for Adventists who were like, hey, what about religious freedom? Well, the idea is, hey, whatever you think about that, but we are a pro-vaccine denomination. We are very pro-vaccine, and we believe that herd immunity is a part of that biblical revelation, that spirit of prophecy, and you could either say informed by or based upon peer-reviewed literature. I mean, that's essentially it. So you can see the real-world implications of it right away.
But isn't it, I would have to say, though, that if you took any 100, any 1,000, any 10,000 Seventh-day Adventists every 5 or 10 years here from then until now, and you ask them, do you know you're part of a church that is on record, that's pro-vaccine, that they expect you to get all these vaccinations? I'll bet you that an extraordinary high percentage of the persons that you interviewed would say, No, I never heard of it at all. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. In fact, I'm kind of concerned now that I've heard that.
Yep. Well, exactly. But that leads you to believe that the statement was sort of made for other people, not just for our church members, because who, after spending the week reading their Bible, goes and looks up the church's new official statements? No one does. Like I said, when I noticed it, I was shocked, but few people who I spoke to thought it was even a big deal. But now we see that it actually was a bigger deal than we imagined. And this gets us back to medicine. Now, this was an article written in 2022 by Nicholas Miller. He's a professor at Andrews University, the seminary. I actually took classes underneath him. Thought he was a nice guy, very intelligent. But I want you to see this here. He is speaking with the full authority that he believes that he's vested in from working at the institutions and being a lawyer who has represented religious liberty cases. He feels completely empowered to say the things that he's going to say against people who don't want to take the shot. And I put a red arrow here because I want you to see what this did to our own church members. I'm using him because his statement was public. There are other people who felt probably the same way who were in our institutions as well. And he says, notice here, he says, and the most important, most tragic comparison is undeniable. Now, I love that line, is undeniable. What's undeniable? That the anti-COVID vaccine movement has contributed to the needless deaths more Adventists than David Koresh ever did. Now, that is serious hyperbole if you've ever seen it, because last I checked, David Koresh was not a Seventh-day Adventist, but he was a Branch Davidian. And most of the people who died in his compound were Branch Davidians. There were a few who once were Adventists who became that. So how in the world could you say that? In other words, his most tragic comparison is really tragic because it doesn't even based on fact, but he was so upset that Adventists were wanting to exercise religious liberty. After all, didn't they read the official statement? And so he's saying that Adventists who didn't want the shot were worse than David Koresh. That's his words, not mine. And I want you to see this, because when we decide that we're going to follow medicine no matter what, we get confused on issues like religious liberty, medicine itself. We ended up adopting some of the most absurd and insane things you could ever imagine because our medical institutions are pulling us closer and closer to the world and further away from the very sources that we mentioned that our health message is based on, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. This is Mr. Standish. He's also a religious liberty attorney. I came and spoke at one of my classes one time while I was in the seminary, and he published this article. This was an Adventist Review. This was in 2022, and he was very upset too that people weren't taking the shots. And he says, spotting a lie can save your life. And again, he was upset that people didn't want to take the shot. And again, he's feeling pretty empowered as well because he's standing on the official statement. He probably phoned up some of his friends at Loma Linda, like, oh, absolutely, this is safe and effective. You know, people are dying. And so he writes with bated breath about all the people dying and how things need to change. And just read in the middle, the middle block, the last paragraph, and just see it right here. He's talking about people who resist the vaccines. He says it's not just Adventist doctors. On February 24th, the world learned that 8 healthcare workers vaccinating for polio were assassinated in Afghanistan by Islamic extremists. As I write, however, the anti-vaccine extremism is killing the most people isn't among traditional healers whose place in society is threatened, nor among Islamic extremists in faraway lands. Today, the extremism has infected our church and is spreading one social media post at a time. So notice he talks about Islamic fundamentalists who shot to death people vaccinating in Afghanistan for polio. And he's saying that the people posting anti-vaccine comments within his church are the same type of extremists, and they're causing death. They're causing death. I want you to see what this has done to us. And again, this is all punching down. These people are all well ingratiated in the institution. They're well ingratiated. Notice that there was never an article published in the review by anyone who took a different view. There was never an article published in Religious Liberty TV or the Lake Union Herald or any of those other places who had a different view. There was never any balance there. It was simply, you're wrong, you're an extremist, you're worse than Branch Davidians, you're worse than fundamental Islamic extremists. So I'm just pointing this out because it shows you what happens when we blindly follow medicine and we blindly go along without questioning, and we no longer actually use the Bible or the spirit of prophecy to guide us in medicine. And so I just want to point this out, all right? So this article was published actually during the pandemic, and this article was published in 2021, all right? And this is a number of authors here. The one I know is Dr. John Ioannidis, who is from Stanford, and they did the statistics, and they found that, and it's called non-pharmaceutical inventions, which includes masks, social distancing, and they found that these things were not very effective. These things were not effective. They were writing this in 2021, telling people, hey, all the lockdowns, everything that we're doing isn't effective in stopping the spread. Again, this was known. Again, here's another article published in 2022, and they were talking about the unintended consequences of the mandates, the passports, the restrictions. They're saying may do more harm than good. They're talking about disunity, exclusion from social life, erosion of trust. All these things, they were warning about this. And again, the members of our church choosing to be the tail and not the head couldn't even read this, couldn't even be bothered with this to say, hey, maybe we should lighten up on our policies. Maybe we should actually, if we're going to be informed by peer review literature, maybe we should read some. Nope, wasn't going to happen either. This is another article published in 2021 where they found that more deaths were caused from the lockdowns, which you had deaths from despair, which were suicide, car accidents, alcohol, drugs, more causes of death during the pandemic than actual people dying from COVID during that same time period. And this was in Peru. But again, no one could be bothered to read this. No one had time for that. And on top of that, when we sat there and we published in our own journals, we published in the Review and Herald that the vaccine was safe and effective, that you're an extremist if you're not taking the shot, you're worse than a Branch Davidian if you're not taking the shot. It turns out the British Medical Journal, which obviously we know is not an Adventist publication, published in 2021, they talked about a lawsuit that was happening from a whistleblower who mentioned that the trials, which demonstrated the vaccine was safe and effective, were garbage. And she went through here, and her lawsuit is in federal court to this very day. They went through the entire thing. She had document after document demonstrating how they fudged the data, how they didn't even do things right. And she was like, look, I've been a part, this is a Brooke Jackson. She's like, I've been a part of clinical trials for quite some time. They're not doing it right. And this was published in 2021. This is more about what she found. Again, the British Medical Journal, they could have been reading that. They also could have read the very studies which were published demonstrating that the vaccines were safe and effective. This is the New England Journal of Medicine article, and this was published right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm just going to read the green here, all right? It says, drug sponsor Moderna was responsible for the overall trial design, site selection and monitoring, and data analysis. A medical writer funded by Moderna assisted in the drafting the manuscript for submission. So I just want to use this. If a sports team gets to decide the rules of the game and who's going to be the referee, they get to decide that. Don't you think that would be a competitive advantage? And it is. It turns out that this is a well-known tactic that drug companies have done for a long time. Back in 1999, there was a series of lawsuits over Vioxx. And when they went and they looked at all the data for the Vioxx test, there was this large study called the Vigor trial where they used Vioxx in all these different groups. And what they found was that the drug companies had figured out if they set the parameters, they designed the study, they fund the study, they put the people in there that they're going to be monitored in their pockets, that they're going to get the results they want. And this has shown to be great corruption. And here it is. It was published in. Why wasn't anyone reading this saying, hey, maybe we should pump the brakes and not decide to divide the church over the issue of this vaccine? Why don't we just watch and wait? Why don't we do that? But nope.
Yeah, I don't think there was any pumping of the brakes whatsoever.
Nope.
It seemed like the people in the institutions were completely siding with sort of the blue state mentality, for lack of, I don't know quite how to describe it, but there's sort of a government the government will tell you what to do, sit down and be quiet mentality, and we in authority will tell you what to do, sit down and be quiet mentality. So it seemed as though the sounds that were coming from our administrative parts of the church seemed to have a sound like that, because everybody that had any alternative view or a moderate view seemed to be very decidedly kept zipped off to the side. You could not really openly talk about it. At least that's the way I recall.
Yep.
As anybody who did was sort of the wrath descended upon those people in various ways, and we seem to have not been allowing any kind of liberty or any alternative viewpoints within the church. Instead, there was an iron hand, only this viewpoint allowed, and anybody with any other viewpoint was basically squished to the side. You just weren't allowed to express it openly. That's how I recollect the
Yep.
feeling, the sense that it was at that time.
That's right. I wholeheartedly concur. That's exactly it. And even now, I mean, even during the general conference session, Dr. Neil Nedley stood up, and he was not happy that people were trying to bring up and have another discussion on the 2015-2025 statement. And he was upset. He's like, we got many things to do. We need to stop this. And, we don't, in other words, everyone wants to move on and just say, hey, we got better things to do now. We're not going to rehash this. But my point is that when you had the chance to act prudently, when you had the chance to use some wisdom and say, hey, let's not go along with this whole thing because this couldn't be good. And again, what I'm just showing is that you had evidence early on that things weren't the way that we were all being told. If you had been paying attention, like I said, if you had been reading the Bible in spirit of prophecy, you should have been skeptical. But even if you were just reading the peer review literature, which I'm showing you now, you should have been a little skeptical. What you see here in the conflict of interest statements, there's a whole bunch of them that they were making in the New England Journal of Medicine. You can see that right there. So the point of the matter is that they had the ability to know. They could have known, but they didn't want to. And again, look, remember, I don't know how many people remember, but I think in 2023, 2024, maybe 2024, there was the chief marketing executive of Pfizer was there at the European Parliament, and she was asked a number of questions by one of the European Parliament members if they had ever tested to see if the vaccine, or if they knew that the vaccine couldn't stop the spread of the disease. And she said, no, we didn't know that. We had to go to the speed of science. But the truth of the matter is even in 2020, the British Medical Journal published an article talking about how the trials that they were doing didn't even test to see if it would stop transmission of the disease, didn't even test to see if it would stop deaths, didn't even test to see that it would be interrupt or shut down the virus at all. They knew this in 2020. My point is that we went along with the whole thing. And later on, it turns out that they blew up their placebo-controlled trial. What they did is after about 6 months of doing it, they unblinded the placebo group. So they said, hey, you guys all want the shot? And I think 96 to 98% of everyone in that group said, yeah, we'll take it, because they signed up to take the shot to begin with. We'll take it. So now you don't even have a placebo group where you can see the harms and damages done. After 6 months, you don't even know. So the point is that we had all these reasons to be skeptical and to question, and we failed to do any of it. And so anyways, I have a bunch more slides. I know we're getting out of time, but I just want to make the point here that we didn't follow the Bible. We didn't follow the spirit of prophecy, and we ignored even the peer review literature. We decided from the very beginning that we are going to support one system of medicine. We're going to do that even to the detriment of our own church. And I just want you to see something here, because this is a statement that was made. They basically said that this was the Adventist News Network, and they basically said that, hey, we can't support your religious exemption. You're out on your own. We don't have the resources to advocate for religious exemptions. We can't do that. We can't do any of those things. We can't seem to support that. They even say, right here in the second paragraph over here, if we use our religious liberty resources in such personal decision advocacy efforts, we believe that it will weaken our religious liberty stance in the eyes of the government and the public. In other words, if we took a stand for our own members, the people who pay tithe, the people who support everything, the people who do mission work, the people who hold Bible meetings, the people who evangelize for the church, with these people, if we support those who don't want that, it would hurt us, right? That's what they said. And I just want you to see how naked this statement is, because when it came to the Protect Marriage or the Equality Act, it turns out that we used our capital, our power, our influence on the Hill to basically push legislation along with the Mormons to support a bill which codified the Obergefell decision, which was the decision by the Supreme Court to allow for gay marriage. In other words, we wanted to support legislation that would essentially codify in federal law gay marriage. That's what we were willing to do. Can't support members of our own church, but we can support this. This is a real religious liberty issue. And again, if you don't believe me, this is the press release talking about how they supported this. And they even did a video roundtable where they talked about why they were supporting it. And again, I just want you to point out that, like, now there was an American Pope, and there talks about Donald Trump, Project 2025, and people are very, very concerned about these things. And I think it's definitely worthy of investigation, right? But when the entire church world supported the shot, there was no, well, we need to do something. We need to do something. Here's the Vatican promoting it, saying, hey, you need to do it. Vaccination is an act of love. The Pope gets it, encourages other church, talks about in their own history where they supported mandates and they supported compulsion. The World Council of Churches supported it, and yet you couldn't get us to say one word about it. There were vaccine passports. There was the locking things down, and we couldn't be bothered to see that this was a religious liberty issue. And I get it. It's not the mark of the beast. We all agree with that. But my goodness, how could you not look at the tracing apps that you had to put on your phone and say, hey, that's not a good idea? How could you not look at the fact that you have to show a vaccine passport to go into a restaurant, to travel, even to go anywhere? How could we not see that as being an issue? Even the Atlantic, which is a very left-leaning publication, looked at what they did in Australia and said, hey, they're destroying their civil liberties. They're taking them away. This is the Atlantic, which supported the lockdowns and supported all, and said, whoa, even Australia is going too far. But the reason why I point this out is because when we trust one form of medicine, we have a skewed view of religious liberty. We have a skewed view of the Bible, a skewed view of the spirit of prophecy. And it even leads to crazy things like this. I just want to do a real question here. I just want you to see this, all right? So is this, by our church, is this considered religious liberty? 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 Again, these are all pictures of abortion. Or is this considered religious liberty? The only one out of all of these that is not considered religious liberty isn't this one. That's considered religious liberty. That's considered religious liberty. That's considered religious liberty. That's considered religious liberty. But saying no to a shot is not considered religious liberty. My point is that our form of medicine, we are willing to twist and contort every aspect of the spirit of prophecy, every aspect of the Bible, to make it say something that it doesn't say. And I know people go, well, abortion, we don't know about that. Well, we should know about that. If you read your Bible, it should be very clear. But let's go to something that may be even easier for you. This is a study done, and they were looking at the outcomes of transitional surgery in transgendered individuals, all right? And if you look here, I put an arrow by a physician there, and he actually works at the Department of Plastic Surgery of Loma Linda. And they were trying to figure out, they were talking about how people were feeling better after getting these surgeries. In other words, it's helpful. Here's an article written by a medical student. She's probably a medical doctor now. This is in 2021. and they were worried about transgender discrimination in healthcare. This was published on Loma Linda's own website. It may be gone now because I guess we're doing 1984 type of stuff these days. But she published this article talking about how we need to really do a better job of taking care of transgender and doing affirmative care. Now, she doesn't use the word affirmative care, but that's essentially where she's coming to. And this is on our website. Now, again, I just want to point out, what is it going to take for us to realize that whether you take the statement where our health message is based on the Bible, the spirit of prophecy, or peer-reviewed science, that we actually say, no, what we're doing is not based on any of those things. It's not based on the Bible. It's not based on the spirit of prophecy. And it's not even based on the very thing that you said it was or informed by the peer-reviewed literature. It's not.
So we're talking predominantly our theme that we've said here, the 2015 statement /2025 statement. You're making the point here that even in its moderated form, when it says Bibles, writings of Ellen White, and peer-reviewed science, that when we go to that, really, if we are honest with our historical practice, that for the last 75 years, the last half of our denomination's existence, we've really been basically whatever the cutting edge of medicine or science is saying. The Bible and spirit of prophecy parts really are sort of off to the side. We're just doing what the current thing is, that the current medicine is saying is the thing. This is a point you're making. Yes. In spite of the statement that you're demonstrating again and again and again here, that actually the science part is the larger of the three in terms of how we actually operate as opposed to what we say.
And the worst part is not even science at this point. It's not even science. Like, there isn't good data for the things that we're doing anymore. There isn't. And this statement is really a fig leaf. We throw that out there so people can feel good about the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. And yeah, we're science-based, but we're not. The idea of doing, I mean, look, if we were willing to do lobotomies and we still perform abortions, what's next? Transgender reassignment surgeries in our hospital? Like, where are you going to tell me now that that's supported by the Bible and the spirit of prophecy? Like, where does it end? Where is someone going to sit down and draw the line in the sand and say, there's a lot we do here that isn't supported by anything that we're doing. And if we're going to run a healthcare system and put pictures all over the wall with Jesus and put quotes from the spirit of prophecy and put some historical pictures of John Harvey Kellogg and George Knapp Abbott and hydrotherapy, and we're going to talk all that game, my goodness, why don't we do what we do? Like, it's just vestigial. It doesn't mean anything. It's ultimately a ruse. And the fact that we're like, well, peer-reviewed literature, no, it's not even there. It's not even there. Whatever the system of medicine does, we have to do. Why? Because when you invest that much time, that much effort, that much human capital, and that much money into a system, you can't bite the hand that feeds you. You just can't. And I just, if you indulge me just for a second here, I just want to point this out. All right. I just want to point this out because, again, when it comes to vaccines, people are like, well, maybe, that's helping your neighbor, whatever. I want you to hear what E.J. Wagner says here, and it's very short. This is in 1899. Now, he doesn't actually appeal to Ellen White. He actually appeals to the Bible, and he talks about this. And he says this: at the recent Health Congress in Blackpool, a paper was read by Dr. Adler, Chief Rabbi of London, on the antiquity of sanitation, a reference, of course, of being made to the regulations found in the books of Moses. Those rules were given by the Lord himself, and when followed, produced the healthiest people that ever lived. Let it be noted, however, that inoculation was not included in the list of preventatives of disease. Perfect cleanliness within as well as without the body is the sum of the whole matter. Clean food, pure water, fresh air, plenty of sunlight, regular muscular exercise, and a clean conscience will ward off any plague known. It may be said that vaccination and inoculation have saved many lives. No doubt they have served a purpose, and yet will do so among people who find that course easier than keeping themselves thoroughly clean. But to fill one's body with death as a means of warding off death is unscriptural and unscientific. Now notice, his view is based on the Bible. His view is based on the Bible. And I just want you to see this, because people go, well, they didn't have vaccines back then. But guess what? They did have smallpox. They actually had smallpox. This is the Pharaoh Ramses the fifth, and he actually had smallpox. This is a picture of his mummy. He actually had it. That's his tomb right there. The ancient Chinese had it. They even used to do things where they would blow crust. They would take smallpox pus and they would grind that up into dust or powder, and they would blow it in the nose of people to do inoculations and things like that. That's what they would do. In India, they had a goddess Satala, and you would wear like a shirt where someone had effluvia or pus that leaked into a shirt that had smallpox, and you would wear that, and you would smear yourself with dung and eat different herbs. In other words, smallpox actually existed in those days, in the time that the Bible was actually being written, and it was dealt with all the nations around them. But the question is could the Hebrews at that time, as Wagner is pointing out, could the Hebrews have done any of this just based on the Bible? Could they have done the very things that they were doing, scratching themselves with pus, blowing dust into the nose that was based on smallpox sores, rubbing yourself with dung, wearing a shirt that was covered with the effluvia of smallpox? Could they have ever done it? The answer is no, 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 and no. So my point is that even looking at the Bible, our church members felt that the vaccination program wasn't even in harmony. Even Kellogg in 1899, before the General Conference, basically says, he calls vaccination, he says this method of fighting disease, that is giving someone a disease or making them sick to make them well, he says, is the human way of meeting disease, just as we fight fire with fire. But God has given us a truth that in it has the power to lift man above the disease, and the man above the power of disease. He has given us principles which, if we obey and follow, will change our bodies, that we shall not have to be vaccinated. That will lift the body above the power of disease and above the power of sin, for sin and disease go along together. Disease is the consequence of sin, and sin induces moral disease. Now, he believed, which is interesting at that time, and I'm sure many believed, that the gospel had the ability to work in your life to help you to overcome sin. And he believed that the health message, like the gospel, working your life could help you protect you from disease, could help you overcome disease, and become stronger, develop a better immune system. That's what he thought based on the Bible. And again, there's much more I could say about him and his views on vaccination, but I'm just pointing it out that if we were just going to be with the Bible, we would have a very hard time making a case to inject ourselves with aborted fetal cell tissue, eagle medium, insect medium, monkey kidney cells, brain tissue from rodents. Like, we would have a very hard time, and the Hebrews could never accept that. And this is Daniel H. Kress, who was an associate of Ellen White back in 1904, and even he didn't see smallpox vaccination as something that was biblical. He just didn't see it. It didn't mean he was an anti-vaxxer. He just felt like there's probably a better way. Something happened to us. And my point is that we have lost our skepticism towards medicine. We have lost a questioning. We have lost the idea that the Bible and the spirit of prophecy are the lenses by which we evaluate peer review literature. We have lost it. And what we've decided to do is go along with everything under the sun: abortion, transgendered care, even frontal lobotomies. And I could keep going. There's probably more things that I haven't even discussed that would be abhorrent to us. But this is the problem. Those things no longer have authority in our lives, and they certainly don't inform us on how we should practice medicine anymore. And so I'm putting this all together because I want people to see, whatever you think about the statement, we are so far removed from the basic principles of the Bible and the spirit of prophecy guiding our health message that we don't even look anywhere remotely like we used to. We are so far removed. And unless we decide to reform, I don't know what's going to happen to us.
Tim, there's a comment here. I'm going to put it back on the screen.
Yep.
There's several comments going past, and you probably didn't get a chance to look at them all. But this comment in particular from Brother Barrett, As individual members, what can we do at this point? We've already sent our letter of protest to the General Conference. So I want to round out our presentation here in the last portion of it here. Let me just ask you about the 2015 and 2025, and then I want to come back to what Brother Barrett is requesting here. What do we do now? I think that's a place where you've taken us. So you showed us that the March 2015 and the April 2015, there's two differences there. We know that on one night, the president had certain quotes. This is in our general conference session here a week or two ago, certain quotes. And then the next morning, we heard that, well, maybe the wrong thing had been on this certain website for 10 years, the public facing. And so this is the actual statement. And what I, as we were looking into this, I was thinking, you were going to look at those statements side by side and kind of help us understand, which one came first and how can we tell what the ultimate statement actually is. And you've taken us a little bit further than that here. You basically said, well, no matter how perfected you make this statement, we're not doing what that statement says anyway. So any comment you want to have about the adjustment in the presentation about what the statement was or wasn't? But I know your point is kind of that either way, maybe one's got a little bit better wording in some respects. But at this point, what should we regard as the actual 2015 statement? At this point, what do we do at this point? Because we seem to be having an issue with the beliefs. For most Seventh-day Adventists, our beliefs are truly what the Bible teaches. We want to be in harmony truly with the inspired writings we believe God has given us through the gift of prophecy that Ellen White manifested. We want to be in harmony with that. I don't think there's too many people who join the church and say, oh, by the way, I want to make sure I'm in harmony with these different policy statements that might have been done in a room somewhere in a big, large building. Yeah. So I'm not trying to take away, the value of having people in leadership trying to put together, hopefully, what they think are meaningful, helpful statements. But I don't think very many of us join the church for that. We believe what the Bible-based teachings, the inspired part that's been given to us. We want, what do we do with that at this point? So the 2015, 2025 statement, 2021 statement, anything you want to say about that? And then coming back to the point that's on the screen here, what do we do at this point? Yeah.
So just to help us understand this, I appreciate the efforts to say, hey, my faith isn't built on peer review literature and all this stuff. I do. I think I've been amazed on the organization, the persistence, the determination. I think that's good for all those things. But the fact of the matter is why don't we just say, why don't you prove it? Why don't you prove it? You can't prove that what you're saying is based on these statements anymore. You can't do it. I feel like what we've done so often in our church is that we try to be parliamentarians. We're like, oh, well, if we can craft this policy and, oh, they didn't say it during the session. This wasn't voted on by the world church, so it's not important. I'm sorry. You can say that. But when King Saul was still, when he was king and David was anointed, he was still, even though the things that he was doing were illegitimate, it didn't matter. He was still king. The people in power are still in power. And you can say, well, if we could just change the language. I say, why don't we make them prove it? Why don't we demand that they give us a thus saith the Lord? If we're going to sit here and say we're standing on the Bible, we're standing on the spirit of prophecy, why don't we say prove it? Prove it. Have an open debate. Have a discussion about this. And none of this canned nonsense where you get a bunch of people reading a script saying whatever modern medicine says we will do. We need to keep agitating those type of things. I don't think it's going to change by running up the flag a resolution. I just don't. I think what has to happen is that we need to do better on the grassroots level to educate everyone that we're not in harmony with the Bible or the spirit of prophecy, because that's ultimately what matters. When Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses on the wall, it wasn't to create a different policy. He was telling the church that that what they were doing was wrong according to the Bible. And when he finally made his stand in Wittenberg, when he finally made his stand there, when he finally made his stand at the Diet of Worms, and he actually said, "Hey, I'm going to stand on the Word of God." And I feel like we have to get back to that reformer mentality. And I know it's not sexy, and I know it's not something that's going to make us excited about if we can just get the votes or whatever. Honestly, outside of real reformation and revival, outside of people's hearts changing, you're never going to get the votes. I mean, what was it? 95% voted not even to have a discussion about this topic.
Okay, so you're talking about at the GC session 2022, and then we have the one last week, the week before. So what about the Pearl thing, where we have individual congregations, local church congregations, who are standing up and saying, this statement, with all due respect, this statement does not represent our view. In this congregation, it doesn't fly. We do not adhere to this. You should do this, this, or this. But basically what happens in our local congregation, this statement has no force, and instead we sustain our members' right to liberty of conscience. Is that something we should continue to do until the statement is quietly rescinded?
Well, I mean, I think that's fine, but people need to understand why it's unbiblical, why it's not supported. It's not enough to simply say, well, peer review literature is not in my health message vernacular. It's not enough to simply say that. People need to understand that there's not evidence for Ellen White getting vaccinated. There's not evidence for her ever supporting the vaccine. You can't use the Bible. You cannot use the Bible if you're using it to inform yourself about health, to prove that people should get vaccinations. And you cannot use it to justify mandatory vaccination. We should say, you can't prove it. The statement is false because it's not based on truth at all. I don't care what it says about peer review literature. It doesn't matter. Again, my point is that as long as they're pulling the levers, and I don't mind, listen, if the individual churches want to say, hey, this statement doesn't work here, great. But what are you going to do? If you're working for someone and another pandemic comes up and they say, you need to get the shot, and you're like, well, my religious exemption, and they go, well, type up on the computer, well, this is what your church says. And then you have to do this funny game. Well, I believe differently, blah, blah, blah. In other words, people need to be convinced that this statement is false, that we are bringing a falsehood, we are bringing a bad doctrine upon the church. Again, if the church ruled some other doctrine and said, well, this is the case and it was wrong, we don't say, well, you should change it. We should say, hey, it's wrong, or change the language. It needs to be told that it's wrong. And we have to do this. And again, people don't want to wait for the GC to come. I get it, but it should be happening on the smaller level. Somehow there should be discussions at the university level, the high school level, the local church level. There should be these debates and discussions, and maybe not debates, but there should be these discussions, because people need to be educated that what we're telling the world is wrong. We're telling the world the wrong thing, and we're doing it for the wrong reasons. Again, as I pointed out, what is it that we won't support? If we supported frontal lobotomies, we support abortion. If we're supporting transgender reassignment, it doesn't matter. Like, we're going, whatever we say on paper, we're doing something that is not biblical, and we have to start calling it out and demanding change.
But in each case, though, those are small, relatively small portions of the church. If you take the broader church membership on a global basis, they're not going to be pro-lobotomy. They're not going to be pro-abortion. They're certainly not going to be pro-vax. In each case, these are minority positions, which are advocated by leadership that either doesn't know what they're doing on that point, or they're pro that thing because they want to be part of the global club.
Well, I would say this, Pastor, is that depends on which church you're in. If you were to go to certain churches in California, they're still wearing masks. So it depends on what church you're in. I mean, I I mix it up with some people online, and I can tell you there are plenty who felt that we did the right thing. And remember, 95% of all the delegates there voted not to continue the conversation.
Right. Well, I mean, also the vast majority of those delegates had taken the shot and potentially had a certain degree of psychological exposure. I mean, once you do that, I mean, how do you
justify this? Right. This is my point, is that I get there are a lot of congregations, but if we start pointing out that our medicine, our whole foundation of what we're doing medicine, is not in harmony with what we're saying and things need to change, we have to start educating people on that and building that, because I agree, there needs to be more done about it. But I guarantee most congregations don't understand these issues. I can tell you, even here in Florida, every congregation is different. I mean, there was a pastor who, at a church not far from where I'm at, he was wearing a mask until 2024. And he was hired because I shouldn't say he's hired because he wears masks, but he was hired because he has the similar viewpoint of those hiring them. And he was all on board with that. And so, I mean, look, even in the Michigan conference, it's dividing the conference and these issues. And it shouldn't be, this parliamentarian tactic, this legal ramification. We just need to be standing on what's true and what's not. That's going to light people up on fire,
So from the administrators, let's say you're a church, you're in the conference office, or you're in the union or something. You have to think about it also from where those people are coming from. They have members on either side, not on either side of pro and anti-lobotomy, pro and anti-abortion so much, but on the jab thing. I mean, this is a social, perhaps a mass formation. There was a mass brain, a mass influence of the population that led us to where. So now you're in trying to keep everything working. You're in a church administration, and now you have people who are adamantly anti vaccination and adamantly, or at least this particular vaccination, or adamantly pro, and you're trying to figure out what can we do now from their chair that they're sitting in. Don't we have to be fair and say, wow, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
It really would be a hard thing to know how to proceed. But instead of trying to say yes, no, modify, let's change the wording. Words are magical. Change the wording. If we would simply rescind the 2015 statement, if we could just back away from that or rescind it, we can keep our hospitals and just rescind the statement and kind of have a reset. I hate to use the word reset, but let's use it there. I wonder if we could get to a spot where we can actually talk with each other, and a lot of like the neglected pieces that you showed that during this last 5 years, a lot of the content was actually there to show, hey,
Yep.
wait a minute, but that was all neglected. It was poo-pooed and thrown to the side. I wonder if we would be able to actually look at some of that. So I don't know. I want us to end on we need to wrap up here. I'm pretty sure, but I'm trying to think of what positive line we can take from this. So,
well,
go ahead.
I want to address what you said about the what administrators should do. And my point is that in the book that I co-authored, Ellen White is not an anti-vaccine person, or wasn't an anti-vaccine prophet. She was not. She doesn't write anything about it. Her experience is her experience. She did think it was a perplexing question. She did think it was harmful to her son, but she didn't offer an objection when her son and his associates got it. And I think if we were to use that example to what it actually is, because we've amalgamated to be that she recognized herd immunity, told everyone to get the shot, which she didn't. If we just went back to a neutral position or said nothing, that would alleviate this. But I think the issue of the mandates and all this is of a greater issue. And the greater issue is that we have strayed away so far away from our original blueprint of what our health ministry should look like that we're doing crazy things. We don't do lobotomies anymore, right? So we don't do that. But my point is when it was in vogue, when it was the science, we did it. But now look what else is in vogue. Abortions are in vogue, transgender reassignment, And so my point is that when are we ever going to say this Bible and the spirit of prophecy are guardrails? We should go no further. I'm not to lift up the Catholic Church, but they go so far that they don't even do birth control because they're just against it. And they have fought tooth and nail for that right in their hospital. When are our hospitals going to say, hey, we don't hate transgender people, we don't hate homosexuals, but we're not going to do those surgeries in our hospital? We're just not going to do it. We don't care. We'll fight every single lawsuit. We'll do it. When are we going to say, hey, look, we have people in our church who are for vaccines. We have people in our church who are against them. We're going to protect both. If they want it, they get it. Where is going to be the adults in the room that are going to say, we have guidelines, and the guidelines are the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. We need to do what those things are saying as we navigate ourselves through this healthcare space that we find ourselves in. If we don't get back to that, I don't know what's the point of our institutions, because our point of the institutions was to demonstrate the healing ministry of Jesus through medicine, through lifestyle changes, and all the things that we could do. And if we're not doing that, what are we doing?
Well, if you're riding a train, you get on a train and the train begins to move, and you begin to think to yourself, hey, this is moving pretty fast. You know, I think, and I'm not supposed to be here. I think I need to get off. There comes a point to where the speed of the train is so great that it now becomes very, very dangerous, life-threatening, even dangerous for you to get off. Yep. Because the train is moving so rapidly. You get off a train that's moving 10 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour. Compare that to get off trains going 45, and you land on a rock as you get off the train.
Yep.
You know, there's that probably fatal type situation. So if we're in a very fast moving train here, yeah, we need to figure out at this point, the train isn't going to slow down. So the question is, are we going to ride the train, or are we going to get off the train? And if we get off the train, we might have take a real serious tumble, because maybe the train's just going too fast to get off. And yet, if we don't get off the train, we'll wreck for sure. So we're in a rough spot, unfortunately. I'm sure well-meaning people have put us in this spot, but we're still our own thinkers. We need to be careful, and we need to stay with the message that God has given so we can finish the work. And so the church, it's not enough to just carry on where we are. We're not beating a dead horse here. This matter must be resolved. And you're pointing out that even if we take the smoothed out version of the 2015 statement, that so what? It still is not representing in an accurate, factual way what we stand for as a people, and we still have some serious problem here.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think if you go to the Old Testament, there are reforms. If you think about the reforms under Hezekiah, they were extreme considering what his father had done, shutting down the temple, putting an idol there from an Assyrian god. And then Hezekiah comes in and starts destroying idols that had been there. I think he destroys it. Maybe it's Josiah destroys it, but he destroys the statue that Moses had built with the bronze serpent. He had to destroy that because it was being worshipped. I mean, he had to do that. But what people don't realize is we're like, oh, well, Hezekiah did that. That was easy. It wasn't easy. The priests lost their jobs. The whole system of worship had to be reconstituted. It was quite difficult. And Josiah had the same thing. And then after both of those men died, it was apostasy was back on the train, so to speak. If that doesn't happen, you know what does happen is that God will send Nebuchadnezzar. So if we don't decide to take radical steps to change things and get back to the scriptures according to the Bible, then God will send a Nebuchadnezzar to do it for us. I know a lot of us are thinking it's time for translation any moment now, but I can't see the loud cry going out. I can't see things continuing as they are outside of a shaking, a revival, and an outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And I think if you're following prophecy, you would agree that those things are all going to happen. And I think what we're seeing right now is a bit of the shaking, but it's got to continue to do its work so that we can see revival and outpouring of Holy Spirit. So we can be ready when Jesus returns. And
Right.
that's really what we need to be focused on, because I don't know what the future will hold, but what the status quo can't be the face of the three angels message. It just can't for now.
Right. Well, I don't know if we really met the title I gave it, our extravagant title. I think we didn't quite go completely in that direction that I had in my expectation, but I think we've gone in an important direction, and I think this has been a very important conversation. I'm glad we had it.
Likewise.
Yeah. So the conundrum remains, the challenge remains, and we are not at a stasis point. This isn't going to stay the same. It can't stay the same. And the real questions in my mind are kind of like, okay, now what do we do next? Which is what some of our viewers have been asking. So we need to all put our prayer hats on and think this through some more, and we need to figure out how the Lord is leading. I happen to believe that if we can find a way to rescind the statements, get rid of 2021, get rid of the 2015 and all its permutations, that we could at least go to a space from which we can go somewhere else. But that as long as these statements continue to stand, there's going to be friction, needless disunity, needless distrust, and there's other statements which shouldn't be there as well. So we need the Holy Spirit. We need Jesus to be leading us as a people. And I want to thank everybody who came and participated here. I hope this was you feel like this was a useful part of your time as a servant of God this week, to listen to this and try to think with us. And we're trying to do, like somebody said here, we're trying to have straight talk, not just to take up space and have straight talk, but because this is not satisfactory. We need some leadership somehow. And I don't know that any of us has the magic dust to fix it, but we can't stay here. And Dr. Tim, thank you again for tell us now that we're finishing though, tell people where they can find your book. Perhaps very few people have actually read this remarkable book you put out. If only we would have read that book before 2020, when you published it in 2017. If only we'd have taken some action before we got to 2020, we could be in a totally different place. We could be the head and not the tail. But anyway, that's not the way we did it.
No.
Talk about your book and any website you have, and then
you can find it. You can find it, Restoring the Right Hand. I think there's a digital copy on Amazon. You can also follow some of the work I do on Rumble. I have a Restoring the Right Hand channel, and I also have another channel called Biblical History and or Prophetic History and Archaeology. I also talk about a lot of those issues as well. So those are the places that I can be found, and those are all good things to follow up with. But I agree with you. I feel like I feel in some instances that maybe God is using all of this. I believe that He's using all of this.
I believe He's going to work. He's doing something for us through this.
Yes, I do too. I mean, this is refining and shaping the character of the church, and these things are long past due. Like I said, if we're there's got to be somewhere, someone's got to start standing up and say, where are the guardrails for our medicine? Where are they? Where are they? Where are they when it comes to abortion? Where are they with transgender care? Where are they with liberty of conscience? Where are they with all the drugs that we're giving? Where are they? Where are they?
Tim, the exact title of your book, what is it again?
Oh, it is Vaccination, Biblical Revelation, Ellen G. White, History and Science. And it's found at restoringtherighthand.com or at Amazon.
All right. And somewhere on this channel, if you're in, those of you that are watching the Larry the Guy from Michigan channel, there's a 15-minute or whatever 10-minute review where I went through that book. And obviously I took it pretty serious because here's Tim again. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody that tuned in. I looks like we've been at this for quite a long time. We've got to turn it off. So thank you all for participating. And next Sunday night, I think I'm going to be stuck in meetings and I won't be able to do the podcast. But the following Sunday night, I believe, I've lined up another person who was at our recent GC session. and remarkable person. I've done a podcast with her before, Ingrid Wingard, and we have a very, very cool thing to talk about that actually sounds kind of like the solution section here. It sounds like it might be a piece of that. So if we're able to pull that off here in 2 weeks, that's a plan we have from Ingrid from Netherlands. So anyway, I hope you'll come, not next Sunday, because I don't think we're having a podcast then, but the following Sunday we'll be back, Remedial Protestantism podcast. Thank you, everybody, and God bless you. Nadette is asking for the title to be put in the link. Tim, if you'll text that to me, I'll drop it into the YouTube
Sure.
description here at the bottom, so anybody who's looking for the exact title of your book can locate it there as well. All right, thank you, everybody, and God bless you all. And I'm glad that some of us here, in our faulty ways, we are seeking to be remedial. We're seeking to be Protestants.
Amen.
And we recognize we've got to make some adjustments so that we're really the kind of Protestant that we want to be. God bless you all.